Hey, yo, if you get that reference, shout out to you, man. Recently, a man by the name of Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, passed away. And let me tell you a little something about Razor Ramon. He had this Tony Montana style. He was a pro wrestler, right? Scott Hall, his first character where he got big was Razor Ramon, wore a toothpick, got on the microphone, said, hey, yo, every time, threw toothpicks in people's faces. He had a Tony Montana style vibe if you ever saw Scarface. And the reason I'm talking about pro wrestling right now is because I spend a lot of time watching it. I even watched something now on Amazon called Dark Side of the Ring where it talks about the stories kind of from my childhood, right? Where you see these things. Is it a work? Is it real? Is this who the person really was? It looks at the back, behind the scenes type of stuff with pro wrestling, right? You see guys, I think it was I think his name was Dave Schultz, actually, smacked the reporter John Stossel, I think, right in his face, right? Stossel says, is wrestling fake? He said, does that feel fake? Is that fake? Something like that. I see a video of Hulk Hogan, similar context, puts a newscaster or a late night host in a sleeper hold. The dude passes out cold because of it. Is that a work? Probably not. But what I do think was a work was that little incident that happened last night, Chris Rock, Will Smith. At the Oscars, apparently Chris Rock makes a joke. Comedians are supposed to make jokes. Comedians are supposed to flirt with uncomfortableness, right? They're supposed to push the barrier a little bit. And they're supposed to make light of certain situations in the hopes of getting a good laugh. And, one thing that you could get in order for you to get over certain things is to make some jokes, be a little bit humorous about it. You lose a loved one, you share stories that make you smile about that person, right? Something terrible happens to you, to have that, to have that ability to find humor even in the bad. I think that's what makes life good, right? So that's why I think comedy is important. Anyhow, Chris Rock makes a joke. Will Smith doesn't like it. What does he do? What any mature 50-year-old would do, right? Walks up to the stage and smacks a man in his face. That's false. Smacking in the face is not for 50-year-olds. It's not really for anybody. I don't think violence is going to be the answer to everything. Is your pride, is your ego that hurt that you need to go up there on a national stage and just smack somebody and then walk away like you're some badass? Now, I got to tell you, I've watched the slap championships. You ever see those online where the dude just whap, and just smacks the crap out of somebody? Those are not a work. What Will Smith did, it's either it was a work or Chris Rock's got an iron jaw and he's been smacked before so he could take it. Or Will Smith didn't bring the thunder like he probably should have, man. Serena Williams, he won for King Richard, right? I'm telling you what, if Serena Williams comes with that, whap, she's probably dropping Chris Rock. But Will Smith didn't, man. I don't know. I think it's a work. Anyway, does it even matter? These two people are all in the news now every day. Chris Rock's coming to town here soon for a comedy special. Maybe I'll go to it now. Hopefully he'll crack a couple jokes at that expense. But anyhow, I imagine Will Smith's going to make some money that people are going to continue to watch. He already won the Oscar. Things are good, I guess, in his world, maybe. But maybe not, because he's 50 and he's smacking people. Grow up, brother. Anyhow, this episode we're going to be talking about being a parent. We're going to be talking about some exercise. Who would have thought? A strength and conditioning coach talking about exercise. We're going to be talking about a book I read. We're going to be talking about perspective. We're going to be talking about another book I listened to that I read years ago. And firstly, we'll say, we're going to talk about my boy Boris. Now, Boris is a homeless man. You might be asking, where did you meet this man, Boris? I did it. I read about Boris in a book Down and Out in Paris and London by the great George Orwell, who I'm making it a point to read all of his books this year because that guy could write. He's great. And in an extreme example of investigative journalism, in Down and Out in Paris and London, he lived with the homeless in Paris? No? Yes? He lived with the homeless in Paris. He pawned everything that he owned except for the clothes on his back, barely ate, barely had a place to live. But there he met a man named Boris, and they became friends, right? And he and Boris are talking. Boris is a Russian emigre, all right? A lot of Russians were heading into Paris at the time. This was post-World War I, pre-World War II. And he made this quote in that book, right? Boris said this, victory is to him who fights the longest. And that pretty much sums up everything that you do in life, right? I mean, I have people that come to me that I used to coach, hey, I want to try to get into this field, right? Okay, you're going to have to work like a dog. You're going to have awful hours. Say you want to be a strength and conditioning coach or a football coach, right? You see the hours that these guys work. It's part of the reason why I got out of the game because I didn't have that commitment. I didn't have that drive. I didn't have that fight to continue the fight the longest, right? That's why I'm out of the game. That's why I don't coach anything anymore. I didn't have that drive. I didn't have that fight. But if that's something you want, if that is your end goal, if you want to be a big-time coach, whether in strength and conditioning, football, lacrosse, whatever the sport is, you're going to have to get in the game, and you're going to have to do the dirty work, right? And you're going to have to continue to do that dirty work over and over again, and you got to continue to take opportunities whenever they present themselves, and the only way that these opportunities are going to present themselves is if you're not in hiding, you're not sitting in the back room planning your 5-year plan or 10-year plan. It's that you're actually out there in the game, putting in the work, and trying to refine and work on your game, right? That's the only way you're going to get there. Put in the work. Once you get in the game first, stay in the game, and then continue to work and refine the game for as long as possible until you get to where you need to get to. People in my profession, they quit before the going gets good. They don't want to work for $750 an hour at LA Fitness or $750 a session at LA Fitness when that person's paying $35 for that session, for a 30-minute session or whatever the price was, right? They don't want to drive 35 minutes at 4:30 in the morning to open up a gym. All right, and then from there, they don't want to drive all the way back 35 minutes to go work at a different gym, and then they don't want to drive 20 minutes to go coach football and supervise a weight room, and then they don't want to drive another 20 minutes to go work at a gym, and that's your day, right? And then you wake up the next day and you do it again. You tell some people that. I mean, I feel like I worked for like $750 a week at one point in time. My rent was $900 in a nice small. I don't even know if I should say nice. It was good enough. I felt like I was in a retirement home, but I was like the young dude in there. There's a lot of elderly. They were probably all on fixed incomes, and here I was, at the time in my mid to late 20s, trying to get my freaking foot in the door and trying to do something productive with my life, right? So you're living for $900 a month. You're making about $700-800 a week. Now you got college debt on top of that. You've got normal food expenses and all this stuff. I don't know how I got out of that. I had a car that I paid off. Luckily, I worked a summer. 2 or 3 years before that, I got my car paid off. So I had a car. I had the ability to eat cheaply. I ate a lot of eggs. I drove around like an idiot. And I just kept trying to work forward because that's all I knew at the time, man. And that's all I really ever wanted to do was just kind of work for myself, have the ability to control my schedule, right? So now you tell somebody that, and they're guaranteed they're going to go to college and they're going to be offered this and that. I was talking to somebody, and they're like, I'm going to get my master's degree, and then I'm going to get a 6-figure job, or $75K to start, and then it's going to be 6 figures and this and that. And I'm like, really? Really? That's what you're putting your hopes on, right? When there's thousands of people that are going to try to be doing that same line of work in your general area, but you're going to get that job. That's where you're putting that's where you're putting all your eggs into that basket? Really? And then guess what? When that doesn't happen, you're demoralized and you're depleted because you don't have that mindset of putting in the work. And dang it, if Boris was ready to put that work when he was living on the streets, so should you, all right? Because your situation's a lot better now. It's all about, I guess, managing your expectations too and being honest with yourself. You got to know that you're going to be grinding for a couple years, right? And if you're not open to grinding, then you're not going to reach whatever level you want to reach, right? Every success story has a grind. I'm not throwing myself in a success story because I got a ton of work to do, but I'm trying to remember what Boris said each and every day. Some days are tough. Some days I don't want to. Some days I feel like a total failure, right? And I need these reminders every so often. So hopefully I could serve this reminder to you all, whoever's listening right now. Stay in the game, man. Keep working and keep moving forward, all right? That was from Down and Out in Paris and London, all right? George Orwell. Love him, man. Love him. Moving on now. Yesterday we were at a horse show, man. Something in Pennsylvania. So if you don't know, I got a gym. I got in an old barn, probably, I was told late 1700s. I don't know if that's true. We got to get somebody out here to check it out, but it's old, man. You can see the walls in the background. I got a gym in here. We got horses, right? I had a horse show yesterday. My daughter just turned 4. Absolutely loves horses. It was like not even 40 degrees and it was super windy. It was like we were in a wind tunnel. What did this girl do? She woke up at 6:30 because Marisa was going to the show. Marisa's like, I have to go to a horse show. Do you want to come with me? Emmy said, absolutely. Because she equates going to a horse show being able to sit on a pony. We're there every, hour or two. Is it my turn to ride yet? I wonder which pony I'm going to get to ride. That goes on for 7 or 8 hours. It was like the longest show of the season so far for this. It's a collegiate horse show. And then at the end, 7 or 8 hours of waiting in the cold, in the freezing wind, she gets to ride a horse for 2 to 3 minutes. And the joy that it brought to her face made it all worth it. And it made it worth it for me as a parent. It's like parenting teaches you that, I don't know what it, obviously responsibility. Obviously, if you want to have somewhat of a sane life, you got to be a patient man. But when you see the joy, right, when you can see your child wait that long, and just to see the joy in her face, just to ride a horse around for a couple minutes. 8 hours there, probably rode for 2 or 3 minutes. It was incredible. It brought some joy to her, and it brought some joy to my day, and it made me realize, being out here in the cold, it stinks. It's not ideal. but your little girl had the time of her life, and you need to suck it up. You need to be grown up there, Christopher. You know, even going off of that, dude, I wrote my newsletter this past week. We were in California, and we drop Maurice off to a work event. Emmy and I, we drive 40 minutes, drop her off. We hang out for an hour. Maurice's convention's about to start. I plugged the GPS to head back. That 40-minute ride turned into like over 2 hours. It might have ended up being about 2 hours and 40 minutes, right? So it had an extra 2 hours onto the plan. I'm a little bit annoyed by it. 20 minutes into the ride, 30 minutes in, Emmy's like, I have to go to the bathroom. Took a deep breath because I'm already kind of annoyed by the trip. And now we got to pull off somewhere. And I don't even know where the heck we're going to pull off. And when we get back on, is it even going to be more of a nightmare, this traffic? So we do it. Go to the bathroom. I don't even think she went because we just went before we left. I don't know what happened. She didn't go, really. Maybe she did. Doesn't really matter. Get back in the car. I'm like, this trip's going to take... We're going to get stuck in traffic here. It's going to take some time. And she was like, it's okay, Daddy. We got stuck in traffic going to Mimi's house. I'm brave when we get traffic. And I was like, you know what, Em? If you're fine, I'm going to be fine with this. We put on some stories. We listened to some audiobooks. She eventually actually passed out. The ride turned out to be fine. We got back. We ate. The day was good. But those moments in the car, you know, you try to keep it in perspective. I could have... She smacked me out of being an immature kid, and I think that's a good thing that children do for you, is they smack you out of those childish moments because you could see through their example to like, hey, grow up here. It's not that big of a deal. All right, so what? Like we spent 5 hours at the park the other day. Is it really all that bad? You know, you get to spend 5 hours with your kids somewhere. You get to see them play with other kids. You get to let them. Is that really what I want to be doing? Do I want to be at a horse show for 7 or 8 hours on a Sunday when I have 9,000 things to do for work? No. But she found enjoyment and pleasure in it. She got to ride her horse. It's worth it. I guess that's what parenting is in a nutshell. Big time sacrifice, man. I was talking to somebody at a birthday party last week. He's like, hey, so he's probably like 34. She's like, hey, it seems, you know, being a parent is it's a lot of work. And I was like, dude, you don't have a clue, man. Because I don't necessarily. I was like, what? You thinking about impregnating somebody? And he was laughing. He's like, no. But at some point, you're gonna, right? You know, I think that's his plan. That's why he's asking me. He's like, he wants to know what he's in for, type of deal. And he sees that his sister has kids, and he loves being an uncle and all that. But like, if you're not ready, man, like it's a big time thing, and you need to be ready for it. And if you're not, like, I don't always recommend it to people. I'm like, hey, it's the best thing that ever happened, but it's also like gonna totally dominate your schedule and your life. And if you're okay with that, go into it. But if you're going to kind of hold it against the people in your life, if you're just going to disappear and not be involved, then maybe it's not for you, because you might be doing more long-term damage with your children. And you know, at the end of the day, we want to have these like happy, successful people, right? But you don't want to you don't want to have a kid and have somebody else raise them, or like not be present in their life. At least I don't, because not having an absent parent, a parent that works too much, a parent that spends too much time on the phone or on the computer, right? And it just shows a kid that what's really important to them is probably not them, you know? That you find all these other things. You got to take a phone call, you got to miss a dinner, you got to miss practice, you know, all that stuff, right? You know, these kids start to realize that maybe I'm not the most important thing in my parents' life or my dad's life or my mom's life. So, you know, if you're willing, if you're able, if you want to have a child, man, you got to keep that thing in mind. Like, everything that you do, man, there's no, like my boy John Maynard Keynes said, man, no such thing as a free lunch. There's always unintended consequences, okay? You know, you got to have that. You got to have that always in your mind with everything that you do. So what does that mean for me? I don't get half the stuff done I want to get done, but guess what? That's life, all right? And you just got to keep fighting, like my man Boris said. Anyhow, we talked about my daughter being great, which I feel like I do every episode. Sorry. We talked about traveling a bit. We talked about a book. Now we're going to talk about the body. How about that? Strength and conditioning coach / personal trainer. You know, we got a question that was like, hey, I'm trying to do a pistol squat, and it hurts my back, it hurts my knees. What's going on here? And, you know, the person that they were working with was just like, you know, it's your ankle mobility, you know, you got to get more mobile ankles. And that seems to be the common answer with, somebody told me that a couple years ago, right? You know, and the more I think about it, well, no, sorry. That was the answer, right? But what happens if you have the ankle mobility? This person had the mobility. It was fine. They tested it, said, hey, your mobility looks good. What's going on here? I'll tell you what's going on. The body has these protective mechanisms that just kick on inherently, right? It's like this unconscious thing that occurs to protect you. So if you're feeling it in your back, that ankle is going to stiffen up to prevent you from going to a certain range of motion, because they know something is not right up the chain, right? So if your knee's bad, your ankle might lock up on you, and you might have a stiff ankle. You might have the ability to move that ankle through the desired range of motion, but your ankle might get stiff because it's protecting another area of your body, right? So everything, there's a joint by joint approach. Everything, from the feet on up, whatever joint it is, it affects the joint above or below it, okay? So if your ankle's stiff, then your knee's gonna have to do some work that the ankle was doing, all right? If your knee hurts, maybe it's doing too much work, like I just said. Maybe you need to check in on your hip or your ankle. Maybe something's going on there that you don't know that's going on. If you have bad hips or a bad back or something like that, maybe you have some tightness in areas that are up above or below it. I've been having this terrible shoulder issue, right? And it hurts in my back, it hurts in my pec, all right? So what do we have to do here? Part of this is this subscapularis. It's this thing underneath my armpit here. My tight lat on this side is really putting a hurting on my shoulder joint here, and I'm working it out. I'm using a massage gun, hammering it. I'm doing whatever I can to stretch not only my lower body, which is what I was doing before. My lower body's fine. Every morning I sit in postures and read. Now I'm like, dang, I got to do something up here. And we're trying to address it. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to loosen these muscles up in the pec. I'm trying to loosen up this lat. I got this masseuse, man. This guy's great. And he just dug into this area for pretty much 90 minutes straight. I think the next day, minimal soreness. The day after that, incredible soreness. And since that point here, I just continue to try to work on range of motion in the shoulder joint, try to loosen up the lats, trying to loosen up this muscle where it connects underneath the armpit here, trying to open up the pec, trying to draw the shoulder back, right? So when you have shoulder pain, it's like, yeah, maybe your shoulder's not mobile, right? But my shoulder's rolled forward. So when it does stuff, it gets kind of locked in. Why is your shoulder rolled forward? Maybe I got a tight lat. So other stuff's going on, right? So you have to keep the big picture in mind. You have to have that joint by joint approach. You don't just go to the pain site, put a Band-Aid on the pain site and think it's going to be okay, right? You got to get to the root cause of it all. And you got to take a look at what's above it and what's below it. If your back hurts on the pistol squat or your knee hurts on the pistol squat, it might not be your knee per se. It might be a limiting factor at your ankle, or it might be some lack of mobility, say, in your back or something like that might be causing it, okay? The body works in weird ways. It wants to protect itself, and it will restrict motion in areas if it feels that you're going to further injure yourself if you don't do that, all right? So that's one thing. The second thing is cardiovascular stuff. I had a question on that. I think there's 3 ways that you could really attack the cardiovascular system, right? You got this slow, well, I'm going to say 4. Because if you're not walking right now, you need to get walking. Let's get your steps up, right? That's the first thing, right? If you're totally inactive, you need to start walking. Let's just say you're doing 5,000 steps a day. That's for 1 week. Let's average 6,000. So that means you might get, 7 one day, 5 the next, right? Average 6,000. Add 1,000 steps. And once you're able to do that for a week or 2, then you try to add a little bit more, right? So you want to slowly add some steps in. If you're totally inactive, walking is the first step. Now, if you have been training and you have been doing some things like running, I think you have 3 ways to address this. You have the talk test, we'll say. You have like this zone where you can take a very slow jog and you'll be able to hold a conversation with somebody. That's one level. The second level we're going to say is that area where you could answer a question here and there, but it's not comfortable. It's not like I could use this voice the whole time. In that steady state talk test situation, I could have this conversation I'm having right now with my phone and kind of be okay, not get out of breath and need to take a break from talking. That next level, we're going a little bit faster, right? That's part 2, right? Where you have to push yourself a little bit more, where you can answer a question here or there, but you're not going to be able to hold that conversation for long periods of time. And then part 3 of this is these interval things where you're just busting. You're going hard for 1 minute to 3 minutes, 1 minute to 4 minutes, we'll say, and then you're going to let your body recover and relax for a few minutes, and then you're going to repeat that same effort over and over again. I think those are the types of ways to train the body, and in my opinion, it's best to cycle through those, right? Throughout the course of the year, cycle through, 6 to 10 weeks of one, then you move to the next, 6 to 10 weeks of another. And I try to coordinate it with with the seasons. I was able to run in the winter, do my intervals in the winter, and now that it's starting to get nicer, I'm doing some more steady state stuff because I enjoy being outside in nature when it's nice out and you get that sun cooking you. So I like that steady state, longer runs. And I'm gonna try to, push the distance up a little bit. Each week, add a little bit more. Slowly but surely, just keep adding and see where we end up. Then at that point, I might stop doing the long running and I might do some more like metabolic type stuff, right? Where we're talking about kettlebell snatches and things like that, where it's almost like doing intervals with weights, where you really push hard, get out of breath, and then let yourself recover, right? You could do intervals out on the road, you could do intervals on an assault bike, you could also do intervals with weights, right? When you think about intervals with weights, it's almost like, a Tabata style, 20 on, 10 off, 20 on, 10 off, Heart goes up, then it comes down a bit, up, down, take a break, right? Or you think about some sort of conditioning that you might get in like a CrossFit style workout where you just bust, go, and then you calm down. You recover. 20 minutes of hell, that's your workout for the day. That's kind of where I transition everything, right? So I'll do some intervals, I'll do some steady state. Then I'll probably mix into that a little. Some people call it metabolic conditioning. Some people call it hybrid training, where it's a little bit of cardiovascular work with resistance. But that's how I usually address it, and that's how I would recommend it. Cycle through that so you don't go crazy mentally, and your body gets adapted. I just talked about those protective mechanisms that it has. It also has the ability to adapt and make tasks easiest as possible. That's why practice and that's why putting in the work helps, right? Because if you're able to, you're going to get more efficient at things, right? The more you practice it. And then if you get more efficient at it, then it's not the same intensity on a workout. So it's like, the first time you might do a rowing machine, it's going to make you want to throw up. But if you do the same thing for 10 workouts in a row, that 10th workout you're going to get more efficient with and you're not going to throw up. You got to crank it up a notch, right? So you either crank it up a notch or you change modalities and then you start back over again. You get to that point where you suck, then you practice for 10 weeks, and then you change modalities, and then you suck again. Take that same concept with your, I guess with all training, really, strength training and conditioning type training, all right? And lastly, man, I want to get into a great book. It's called David and Goliath. I talked about it before. I want to go over some of these things that I think are important from this book. I think, everybody talks about Malcolm Gladwell books. They like Blink, they like Outliers. I think David and Goliath is my favorite. One, it talks about this idea. One, I didn't realize how much I used from this book in my day-to-day life, right? A couple years ago, the local high school is looking for a girls' basketball team, right? A coach, sorry. I see these girls on the team. They're undersized, but they could freaking run like deer. These are high-level athletes that are going to play college, soccer, lacrosse, something like that. They're short, though, right? So that's not ideal for basketball, but guess what? You get the right system in there, you might win. David and Goliath tells a story of this guy that had no clue about basketball, but as he's watching these games, he's trying to understand, why don't they defend the whole court? I don't get it. They let the other opposing team bring the ball up to the half-court line, and then they start playing, right? Why don't we defend the whole court? And I'm telling people around here, I'm going to apply for that head girls job, and we're going full-court press, and we're going to be running and gunning, And it probably would have worked better. They probably only won 3-15. I probably could have gotten them to 500 maybe with that. That's just maybe me having an ego right now. But anyhow, that's the idea that came from this book, right? This guy puts on the full-court press, and these girls that were just like, not great. 12, 13-year-olds, which apparently the full court press is borderline cheap. Like, the girls don't have enough basketball experience yet. The opposing team doesn't have enough basketball experience to really master the inbound pass and other passing. So if another team puts a full court press on, it's kind of like playing at a level that the other team is not quite equipped for, right? But anyway, that's what this guy goes with, right? Full court press, gets it. Then Gladwell gets into the story about David and Goliath, where Goliath was this big guy, maybe a giant, maybe having a little gigantism going on. They put all the armor on him, they give him the weapons. He might not have even, somehow Gladwell's talking about how the guy's vision might have been impaired if he did have gigantism. I don't even know what that right word is, but Andre the Giant had it to keep with the pro wrestling theme. If he had that, his vision would be impaired, all this other crap, right? Who knows? All speculation, but really what it do is just slow this man down. Goliath was a big glute, right? He can't move, a big brute that just can't even, he can barely move. He wants that close combat. He's saying, come on, David, come on, David. What does David do? What's his strength, man? He's not going to go hand-to-hand with a big gorilla. He's going to freaking get the slingshot out and start dropping this fool, right? So he blasts one right off Goliath's forehead, then he goes in for the kill. Boom, David wins, he's a hero, right? So what is perceived as an advantage. David and Goliath, the whole book is like what is perceived to be an advantage. Goliath was actually to his detriment. It talks about guys like Richard Branson having dyslexia, and other high, lawyers and all this other stuff that they're dyslexic. And because of that, they were able to focus on other qualities to make up for that. And even just having that drive and that work ethic made them who they are today, right? Because they put in the work. Right. He talks about education, man. And he talks about always having multiple things in your life, right? If you're too focused on education and you get to a school that you look at the suicide rate at Ivy League schools and it's much higher than the national average. Why? Because kids that were the big fish in a small pond at their high school and never failed a class now are a small fish in a big pond. Everybody's like them, right? And they go and they might get their first F or their first C even and have this meltdown, right? They might feel like they are not capable of doing good, I guess. I really don't know, but it really just kills them, right? Shouldn't use that term. It really affects their mental state, right? And it puts them in this bit of a funk. So the Ivy League schools have a higher suicide rate, it's because these kids don't know how to deal with adversity. They don't know how to deal with failure. So what could you do? Well, you could say that, maybe we need to get these kids more well-adjusted early on in life, right? That would work, right? Get them facing adversity so that when it does come, okay, we have to overcome, we have to go back to work. All right, remember Boris, my boy, put in the work, keep working, stay in the game, don't quit, blah, 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 right? Keep working, right? That's one side of it. The other side of it is this. Have something else. You can't let one thing define you. If you're just a student and academics is what defines you, what happens when you're challenged hard and you fail? You're going to feel like a failure. They found at these Ivy League schools that they could let athletes in with a lower, high school, achievement. And even though that they didn't do that well academically at the school, they still had something else. So they still had a sense of purpose in athletics, right? So, don't just be a one-sided thing, right? Don't just be an athlete. Don't just be a student. Don't just be a musician. You got to have some other things, some other form of fulfillment, because at one point in time, you're going to be faced with some adversity. And for some people, they could overcome that adversity, and for other people, it might totally destroy them. Some of the students they talk about, some kids would have been better off going to a smaller school where they could have, been a big fish. And if they were the big fish at a small school, say, or at a not as high academic school, then, their careers might have taken a different trajectory. They would have felt good about what they were doing. And all of that goodness, all of that good feelings, all of that positiveness might have just made them a better worker down the line. But if they would have went to that Ivy, all that stuff would have been squashed. So he talks about that, being a big fish in a small pond versus being a small fish in a big pond. All right? Some are going to be able to get it, some aren't. He moves to the civil rights movement, which is the best thing ever. An interesting part of the story, because he talks about, using the media to trying to get the newspapers, really, to capture some of the stuff that was happening down there in Mississippi with Bull Connor. And so what they started figuring out is that they thought that there was going to be more protests going. The more people were in the streets, if the newspapers took pictures of that, if there's African Americans in the street at 5:05, 100 walking down the street, and then there's some demonstrators there too. It's going to look like there's hundreds of demonstrators there, but really all it is people going home from work and a few demonstrators out there, right? But in the newspaper, it doesn't look like that. And then they did that with schools, right? When kids get out of school, there's a bunch of people on the streets, parents, kids. It looks like a mass of people are out protesting, but really it's just people going on their day-to-day lives and a few protesters there to try to stir up some controversy here and get people moving. Now, fortunately, Martin Luther King Jr. There was kids thrown. They got a bunch of kids got thrown in prison, so it packed the prisons in Mississippi, right? To the point that my boy Malcolm X even said he criticized them for using children as a pawn in this game. But children are all young adults and children are in the prisons, so that opened up the door. The prison's packed. Now the protesters are out there. What does that leave the cops to do? Hoses and dogs, right? So what did they get? They finally got the picture they wanted. They got that picture of that German Shepherd, I believe, lunging at that little boy. And it turns out that the dog wasn't even being aggressive at it. The kid apparently had experience with aggressive dogs in his house and was going to knee the dog or something. It wasn't, what is captured in that photo looks vicious, but really what was going on was nothing. The guy that holding the dog was a mild cop. He, at the time, took that job because he didn't want to be, in the streets as making the arrest. He was a police dog guy, yada, yada, yada. I don't know the story. Turns out they got the photo they wanted. There was a time, too, where the reporter dropped his camera, not this instance, just in general, at one time, and one of the guys that was working with Martin Luther King Jr. was like, pick up that camera and take a photo. Don't help the kid that's getting, aggressively beaten on the ground, because that doesn't help us. You helping them. We need you to capture this and let the nation see what's going on here. So they had this stuff going on. This kind of, they were using newspaper as a manipulative tool here to try to get the heart of the country to support their cause, right? So that was a good part of that. And lastly, another thing that goes with that too, he kind of transitions into the rule of legitimacy, and this is something I might dive into down the road here, because when you look at coaches, right, you hear about these coaches that lose the team, right, where they come in there and they're a source of power, or they come in there for a year or two, things are going good, this guy's laying the law down, this and that, and everybody thinks it's great, right? But eventually you lose the team, right, because the guy acts like a tyrant or the girl acts like a tyrant, the athletes stop respecting them, and they eventually just kind of rise up and overcome the oppressive ruler, so to speak, right? It happened in countries like in Ireland, right? It happened, in a lot of these places. It happened with the Revolutionary War, It happened where it's they just keep taking, and eventually, you had enough of that, right? And you stop and you stand your ground and you overthrow and you overturn or you do whatever you can to kind of get rid of that tyrant in the lead here. And it talks about the rule of legitimacy. Does a person have the right to govern? How do you have the right to govern? By you treat people a certain way and you be fair and you be respectful, right? If you're not, you might lose that. You know, if there's gonna be some social dysregulation here, and the streets are gonna end up looking like they did back in the Martin Luther King days, right? Once you lose that power of legitimacy, if you're a police station, if you're a police department, and you're gonna go into the same towns over and over again and just harass the same people over and over again, you're gonna lose that respect from the people. You're not gonna be a source of legitimacy, and things are gonna go bad. As you can see, we just lost power up here, man. The wind is crazy up here in Pennsylvania here. But anyhow, you know that source of legitimacy is important. You need to have it. You need to treat people fair. You need to treat them with respect. Malcolm Gladwell touches on that. David and Goliath is a great book. It gives you a different look at things. Things that are perceived to be a failure actually turn out to be a positive, all right? So that's the episode. Time to wrap it up here as we just lost power, man. Hope you guys like it. Share it. Let's get some people watching this thing, man. I just hit 4,000 downloads last week. Thank you to everybody who listened before. Thank you for the support. Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Like it, share it. Tell some people about it, man. I'm trying to get this thing moving. Peace, everybody. Have a great day.